Hi, my name is Trevor Nagel, creator of the Lamorna engine, and I'd like today to talk a bit about a feature that I've just added to the engine, a distance fog. This is not a low-lying topographical fog, but rather an effect that fades objects the further away they are from the camera. This is cool for a number of reasons. It adds a sense of depth perception to the scene. We're used to distant objects in the real world appearing blurry due to atmospheric effects. It also looks cool and can be used for gameplay reasons. It's navigating around a map and you see features emerge from the fog unexpectedly. Adds to that sense of exploration. It's also, from a technical point of view, a convenient way of occluding geometry, distant geometry from the scene. So you can if you have your fog set to fade objects completely past a certain point, you can cull any models that lie beyond that point from the rendering pipeline, and that's a computational saving. So where we're going to put the distance fog algorithm is right at the end of our rendering pipeline. At this stage in the frame, all the drawing has completed. All the triangles have been drawn to the screen, and our color buffer and depth buffer are fully populated. So the color buffer contains the final color per every pixel, and our depth buffer has been used as part of that drawing process to create depth coherence in the scene. And there's a one-to-one correspondence between the color buffer and the depth buffer. That is, you read a pixel at a particular location in your color buffer, and you read a corresponding location in your depth buffer, and you get the depth of that pixel. So we're going to use our depth buffer, the values in our depth buffer, to attenuate the values in our color buffer. Now the values in our depth buffer will range from 0, those that are close to the camera, right out to very high numbers for those that are distant from the camera. The values in our color buffer are 32-bit integer values for each pixel. Within that 32-bit integer are contained 4 8-bit channels, which are the red, green, blue, and alpha values, respectively. So the alpha channel is not used, but we leave it in there for alignment purposes. But the 3 separate color channels are what give the final color for that pixel in combination, and they range from 0 to 255. So we're going to do a read on our depth buffer and use that value to attenuate those 3 color channels. Now, conveniently, the larger the value in the depth buffer, the further away the pixel is from the camera, and therefore the greater effect it's going to have on those color values, which is exactly what we want. So let's have a look at the algorithm. Okay, it's really quite compact. So the whole process is quite straightforward. This is some initialization, but this here is the main loop, and we are looping over both the color and depth buffer simultaneously in a single pass. Now this is not the entire screen. For various reasons we won't go into here, Lamorna engine breaks the screen space down into 64 by 64 pixel tiles, and so this is traversing the contents of a tile. And we're stepping over this 4 pixels at a time because we are making use of the vector registers, which handle 4 elements at a time, which is a pretty powerful way of processing this data. So let's step through it. Now we do a 4-element read of the depth buffer. This float 4 here describes a 128-bit data structure which contains 4 32-bit floating point values and likewise the integer as well. So we're basically pulling out 4 pixels depth values and 4 pixels color values. Now, as I mentioned before, the pixels are the color values are in a packed format. So this next block of code is about extracting the individual color channels from that 32-bit value through a series of shifts and masks there. And what this 3-element array ends up with is a floating point value for each channel expressed as a 4-element vector. So that's the red component for 4 pixels expressed as a floating point value, likewise the green and the blue. Now this 3-line element here is the computation block. It's really quite straightforward. So we are squaring the depth, and we do that because there is a inverse square law relationship between distance and intensity, and that governs energy fall off in 3D space generally. So that describes the fall off of light in this instance. So we square the depth and then we multiply it by a scalar. Now I've got 3 separate scalar values here, and they are intended to give me some control over the depth effect. So I can change those scalar values and push the distance fog back or bring it closer to the camera. And I have a separate scalar value for each of the 3 color channels because I wanted to be able to bias the fog towards a particular color if I wanted. And you can see here that I have biased it towards green. So you notice when we run it that the fog has a slightly green tint to it, very matrixy. That really is what we've done there is so take the square of the depth value as we pulled it out of the color, out of the depth buffer, multiply it by a scalar, and we've added it to the color value. Now, I said before that the color values range from 0 to 255. You can imagine at a certain distance that this value being generated here could easily exceed 255, and we have to be able to cope with that. So this next block of code is about clamping the color value. Now I actually clamp it to between 0 and 255, so that clamps it within the proper color bounds. The clamp to 0 is probably not necessary in this instance, but I've done that for conformance reasons. So that prevents our color from exceeding 255, which is important because now we're going to convert those floating point values back into integers and repack them into this 32-bit structure. And if we had values older than 255, we would get overflow, which would create some very unpleasant color effects. So that's exactly what we do here. We're just the reverse of this block of code is we convert to integer and repack down, once again doing it 4 elements at a time, and push it down into the color buffer. Fantastic. Now let's see the thing running. Firstly, we'll see it running without the distance fog effect. So what I'm going to do is comment out that little store which prevents the effect being applied. So let's hit compile, and you should be able to see. Yes, alright, so this is the scene without our distance fog. Fantastic. Now, let's uncomment that and recompile. And this is the scene with our distance fog. Ooh. So So you can see that distant objects are starting to fade there. Let's get to a portion of the map where that might be a little bit more obvious. And you can see also that there's that green tint coming through there. Yeah, there we go. That area of the map where the shamblers are patrolling. And the clouds as well fade off nicely. Alright, so we can control that, the intensity and the colour of that fog effect. So let's have a little play around with that. So why don't we double these values? Okay, so that's 4, that's 6, that's 4. And we'll see what happens there. Yep. Yeah, you can see that that fog is drawing closer. Let's try something. Let's go crazy. Let's knock a 0 out here. Wow. Oh, look at that. Now that is really cool, I think anyway. You can barely see what's in front of you, just a few meters, and Shambler is emerging out of the fog. Now that is pretty cool. It's firing blind into the fog. Wow. Okay. Why don't we bias that fog to be... is that going to be... This should be blue. So we'll drop that down there. Unless I have my channels reversed. Let's have a look. Ooh, I have my channels reversed. So that is actually red. And that does look pretty cool. That does look cool. Lovely. So, there we have it. Distance fog effect. Oh, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.